Deputy Public Defender for LA County and a regular guest. Philip, great to see you. Also with us for this segment, entertainment attorney Larry Zerner. Larry, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And Larry, I'll begin with you. You have a unique perspective. You were an actor as well at one time, appearing on set in that role, but also representing entertainment clients across the board in many different capacities, from copyright to various different types of legal issues. I'd love to get your reaction to these charges.
Well, it's certainly something. I mean, the whole circumstance is so unusual. I mean, it's unusual to have somebody killed on the set by this sort of thing. I mean, this is not something that normally happens. And, you know, it's so rare. The last time you can remember something like this happening where someone was charged was, John Landis, which was, 35 years ago or something in the Twilight Zone case where he was charged with, I think, manslaughter. So there's just not a lot of precedent to go off of in terms of that. Just doesn't happen a lot, and thankfully, but it's people don't usually shoot people on sets.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And I'll tell you, it's not only odd for it to happen for an on-set shooting, but A-list celebrities. I just got a quick list here. I look at about 5. There's been a few, but not that many. Snoop Dogg was charged with murder in 1993. O.J., of course, in 1994. Phil Spector, murder 2003. Robert Blake, 2002. Mark Wahlberg, which I was surprised to find out at one time, as a 16-year-old was charged with murder. Philip Dubé, again, A-list celebrity, charged with a crime here, an on-set crime, which makes it even more compelling. But your thoughts on it?
It's very shocking, and I think it's an act of prosecutorial indiscretion, in my humble opinion. I think this matter actually belongs in the civil arena. Worst case scenario, I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus, this should fall on Hannah Reid, the armorist. And I'll tell you why. Michael, I believe it was back in 2009, the Screen Actors Guild, commonly known as SAG throughout the biz, if you will, put out a safety bulletin to be used by armorists such as Hannah Reid, by production crew, actors, actress, anybody who is a paying member or even a non-paying member into SAG, that talks about what you need to do when handling a firearm. And ultimately, my reading of that bulletin is that unless and until you truly believe that something safe is occurring, you do not point a weapon, but that ultimately a loaded weapon falls on the person who manages those props, those firearms. And in this situation, Alec Baldwin is not a gunsmith. To my knowledge, he's not even a gun enthusiast. He relied on his people to hand him a cold gun. He never, ever thought in a million years that there would be a live round in there. So I respectfully disagree with the prosecutor in New Mexico, and unfortunately, we have to put it in the hands of a jury. I think the only good that can come out of this for Alec is that his max is about 5 or 6 years. It will not carry life behind bars.
Well, one of the other good things that can come out of this, Philip, is that if he's successful in defending himself, he can clear his name once and for all. We know that's been very, very important to him. But Larry, the thing that I thought, and I in part agree with Philip, and I'll get into that in a minute, but I think at least part of the reason why charges were levied against Alec Baldwin, if I read between the lines from what the prosecutor said about the charges, was that it was a fast and loose set. And I think that was part of the problem, and his role as producer gave him some responsibility in that. Your thoughts on this idea? Because a lot of people may not understand the difference between, you're an actor, what the producer does and all that. Help us understand that and why, if you believe, being a producer may have played a role in him getting charged in the case.
Yes, certainly. If he was just an actor, handed a gun, it would be much harder for them to make this argument that he somehow is responsible for the shooting. But because he's a producer, someone brought live ammunition onto the set. That is just something that is just verboten, right? That is not something that is ever done. My best friend is a prop master. He was on your show earlier, Andy Siegel, and he would say you would never just bring live ammunition on the set. And the fact that it was there alone is evidence of some negligence on some parts, whether it's Hannah's or whether the producers are also responsible. They didn't charge any of the other producers, which is also kind of unusual. I don't know why they those people would not also be responsible for that.
No, I agree. And I think you add that with the idea that he was the one that ultimately, quote unquote, pulled the trigger. Again, we know he claims he didn't, but there is, that particular issue as well. I want to listen quickly to the prosecutor in this case on that issue of his producer role and how it may have played a role in the charges. Let's take a listen.
He was the actor that pulled the trigger, so certainly he's charged as an actor. But also as a producer, he also had a duty to make sure that the set was safe. And we know from our investigation that there had been accidental misfires prior to this, that there were people that were complaining about safety on set. And so he should have been aware that safety was an issue on set. And then as an actor that day, he should have checked that gun, checked those projectiles.
Now, Philip Dubé. These charges, involuntary manslaughter, really steeped or based in negligence. They're going to have to show that he was negligent for one of the charges, maybe a little bit more than negligence. We do know previously, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed has said that he didn't allow her to train him. Part of the job of an armorer is to train them, and he was doing a cross draw. We've showed the draw a couple of times here in the video we've been showing folks, where you come across your body with the gun. He didn't get the training. He didn't make time for it. When you start talking like that, does that change your mind in terms of the charges here? Did he have some duty to make sure he was properly trained across the board?
I think as long as he followed the SAG guidelines and truly had no reasonable belief that there was a live round in the gun, what kind of training would be necessary other than to double check, cross-check, or otherwise verify the validity of what the assistant director is telling him, that it's a cold gun? I don't believe that the SAG guidelines, or the law for that matter, requires anybody to do a second or third check. There is no good reason why he could not rely on the word of the very person he hired to oversee all the weaponry used for his production. Why on earth can't he rely on that person? If he cannot, then why do they even have that role? Why are they even on payroll? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think the SAG regulations could be important, but let me ask Larry that question. Larry, you hear the reference to the SAG regulations. I'm sure they'll be a part of this trial in some way or another. How probative or how important will they be ultimately in how this case turns out?
Well, because he's charged with, some sort of negligence, the question is he following the standard of care? And what is the standard of care? The jury will be asked to decide that. And certainly the SAG rules will be a factor in what is the standard of care. This is what SAG has said. I think also the fact that the assistant director has already pled guilty, right? He already took a plea on that deal. So that's also gonna hurt the prosecutor's case, I believe, because they'll just look at they'll tell the jury, he already pled guilty. The assistant director who told Alec that the gun was a cold gun. And isn't that where the fault lies? That's what his lawyer will say, I imagine. I think Philip would agree.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He admitted to negligence and negligent handling of a gun and got 6 months probation. All right, Larry Zerner, thank you so much for joining us today. Truly appreciate you taking out the time to be with us. We have much more ahead on the criminal charges against Alec Baldwin. What exactly went wrong on the set of Rust? Something we've got to dig into. What was Alec Baldwin's responsibility when it came to making sure the gun and the set was safe?